Hey guys, what's going on? It is Broken Nose Vlogs here. Today we're going to be doing a video on CPU coolers, namely stock Intel CPU coolers. Why? Well, because I'm really slow and I learned about stuff at the last minute. But let me preface. So, as most of you probably know, I have two Intel builds along with the Ryzen build back here. I have an Intel 12100F, which is basically made out of spare parts. That is for my Stepmania / Dance Central Revolution emulation. And then I have a 12490F build that I did. That is the China exclusive CPU that I got. That runs with an RTX 2060 Super. That's more of like an office PC / productivity, things like that. Anyways, so both CPUs came without a cooler, and that is because the 12490F just doesn't come with a CPU cooler at all. If you get the box, it's just the CPU. The 12100F should have come with a CPU cooler, but I bought a tray CPU because it's much less expensive. In this case, I believe it was like $55 to $60 to buy the 12100F without the CPU cooler. It was tray only. If I went to like my local micro center, it was closer to $100 at the time when they still had the 12100F. It had been replaced by the 13 and now 14100F, and they were actually a little bit more expensive than the 12100F. Anyways, I didn't have a CPU cooler. That being said, I am no stranger to stock CPU coolers. For the 12100F build, I did do something similar. For the 12490, I did end up getting essentially like a small 92mm fan, but it's a tower style cooler, like, the thermal rights and stuff like that. It was only $20 at Micro Center. For the 12100F, I was like, I'm going to go as cheap as I possibly can. What did I end up with? Something that I honestly can't stand, because if you would have asked if I really wanted to use one of these, I'd laugh in your face. This is an Arctic Alpine 17, which I believe probably stands for LGA 1700. This is essentially a stock CPU cooler as I would know it. If you would ask me years ago, hey, do you enjoy using stock Intel CPU coolers? I'd laugh in your face and say no. Well, why not? Well, first of all, this is literally just a giant hunk of aluminum with a fan on the top of it. Secondly, these push pins are horrible. They're probably my least favorite part about these Intel CPU coolers. They started with the LGA 775s. all the way back in like the Core 2 days, or Core 2 Duo, or whatever we want to call it, and they've stuck around ever since. The whole hunk of aluminum thing is kind of a bother though, because it just doesn't cool all that well. The Arctic version really is just essentially an aftermarket Intel style cooler. The build quality is a thing. Never in my life have I ever seen the ability to turn the heatsink block inside of the cooler itself. Sorry for the terrible sounds it was making. But yeah, like, you know, this is like the same horrible CPU cooler that they had all the way up until, I don't know, like 9th or 10th gen or something. It's just yuck. It's not my favorite. I bought it because I didn't have any other real solution I wanted to deal with, and I was not too impressed with it, as I sort of expected I wouldn't be. But my search did not stop. I continued looking for a CPU cooler that would be easy to install, not require one of those weird bracket setups that like the Thermalrights have, but would still be okay and give me better temps than this thing, which was anywhere from like 68 to 71 Celsius under full load on the 12100F. So I kept looking, and I was poking around on Marketplace. I've seen some articles about the Intel Laminars, which is what I ended up picking up. And they said, hey, they're not that bad. They're a lot better than they used to be. And I was like, I don't believe it. But I found somebody on Facebook Marketplace selling the Intel Laminar RM1s for $2 and the RH1s, which are the bigger sibling to these, for $5. I said, you know what, for $7 I'm going to buy both. I do not care. It can't be any worse than what I have now. The reason why I say that was I found out that Intel had made a slight adjustment to their stock coolers. If you flip this over and you take a look, that is a copper core, which means it should transfer heat better, which means it should cool the CPU better, which means my case fans, which are also synced up to the temperature of the CPU, should not be running so loudly and, you know, causing a ruckus when I try to play Stepmania Project Outfox. Yeah, so I was like, whatever, you know what, I'm going to go for it. Now, granted, Intel, I don't know when they put in these copper cores. It could have been on 10th or 11th gen because my CPUs did not come with a CPU cooler on those. I had I want to say a 10400 and 11600 Intel CPU, and neither of them came with a CPU cooler as well, because I bought them as tray CPUs. But I will say, I mean, AMD's been doing this for a little while too. This is an AMD Wraith Spire. I think it's one of the very first gen Wraith Spires because it doesn't have the LED around the top. But as you can see here, even this Wraith Spire has a copper core on there. So, you know, it's about time Intel caught up, I guess. And don't get me wrong, I'm not on either side. I obviously use both Intel and AMD. But I was really interested in these Laminar CPU coolers. So I was actually so excited I decided to install the RH1 before I even decided to make this video. But I have some stock images. The RH1 is essentially the bigger sibling to the RM1. It's about twice the height. It still has a copper core. It still has LED lighting, though it is addressable. You have an ARGB plug that you can plug into your motherboard. And another neat little feature is on the RM1, you probably won't see it, there is an Intel logo on the fan hub. Well, on the RH1, the fan hub isn't like attached to the fan. It actually sits above it, and it's like a rotatable medallion that lights up white and has the Intel logo on there. I'll show some footage here of the RH1 in action running on the Stepmania PC, and it looks really cool. It was also a neat surprise. They didn't have the terrible push pins. The RM1 still does the push pin style, but the RH1 actually has a plastic bracket that you put on the back of the motherboard, and you can even secure it with included 3M tape, and it sits right over like the back of the retention bracket, and then you just pop the RH1 in, and then you actually screw it in either by hand or with a screwdriver. It's really cool, and for $5 I think it was probably a really good bargain. But outside of being aesthetically pleasing, was it any good otherwise? Well, I think so. The reason why I say this is, like I said, with the Arctic I was getting up to 71-ish Celsius when I was doing things like Cinebench. I decided to do Cinebench with the RH1, and I can actually show you the temperatures after a few Cinebench runs. The thing didn't break about 62 Celsius. So we're looking at like anywhere from like, I'd say, let's say about 9 degrees Celsius at most. That's the biggest, you know, gap from the highest points, because I was hitting 71-ish with the Arctic. So yeah, almost 10 degrees Celsius cooler. For a stock CPU cooler, I feel like that's a pretty crazy like accomplishment. And I'll say it's more than likely because of this copper slug in the back. Now, like I said, the RH1 is about twice the height, and I'm assuming just as much. That copper core probably goes up twice as high as it would on the RM1. And I bet that's probably one of the big reasons why it cools so well. Now, some people are going to tell me, and don't get me wrong, you're probably right, ooh, 10 degrees Celsius isn't a big deal. You're going from 71 to 62. Okay, but because my CPU cooler also dictates the speed of my case fans, I do have some rather loud Corsair case fans, And with the CPU now not hitting anywhere near, it's like 62 at the most, which means when I'm playing Stepmania it's even quieter. I don't have to hear the machine, you know, ramping up and down. It actually stays fairly quiet. I gotta tell you, man, these all aluminum CPU coolers are kind of stinky. I definitely do not recommend buying this. If you can find an RM1 or an RH1 for a reasonable price, I don't think everyone's going to find $5 RH1 and $2 RM1s, but I would say, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 bucks at the most for the RH1. This isn't bad. I say 20 bucks at the most because you can go to Micro Center, if you have a Micro Center near you, and get a Thermalright 120 millimeter tower cooler fan for like the same price, 20 bucks. So 20 bucks is kind of my cutoff point. 5 bucks was a no-brainer. 2 bucks is a no-brainer. But I was really impressed with this. It's really cool. I feel like I'm very behind on stock cooling equipment because for the longest time I have poo-pooed it. Yeah, so this is just me making a video finding out that, hey, Intel makes okay stock coolers these days, and I would actually recommend, if you don't use it, at least hold on to it as a backup. That's what I'm going to use the RM1 for. The RH1 does great with the 12100F. I would say it's overkill. I would probably feel comfortable using the RH1 all the way up to, I would say probably like the equivalent of a 12400, so a 13400 or 14400. The 6-ish core 65 watt CPUs. I probably wouldn't go any higher than that, but the RM1s would be it would be fine for a 12100, 13100. Nothing terribly fancy, but it's a good backup. I'm hoping I never have to use it, but if I have to, I'm, you know, okay. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about Intel CPU coolers and how far they've come from those terrible extruded aluminum monstrosities that we used to get to now. They have LED lighting, they have copper cores, and if you pay a little bit extra, you can even actually mount them very similarly to how the CPU coolers that are in the aftermarket world mount on there. So overall, it's all pretty cool. But yeah, forgive me that I am way behind the times when it comes to finding out how much they've changed these CPU coolers. But I think I'm going to go ahead and end the video. Thank you for sitting here and watching me yap for probably 20 minutes about CPU coolers and just me finding out that, hey, they're not as bad as they used to be. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I know this was more of a talking head video and not so much a, hey, let's build something or do something kind of thing. But I just was actually thoroughly impressed with this and just wanted to make a little talking piece on it really quick. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Like I said, if you've never checked out these Laminar coolers, hopefully this kind of at least inspires you to hold on to the one if it comes with your CPU. Like I said, thanks for watching. Take it easy, guys. Until I catch you in the next video, take it easy. Bye-bye.